Ever wondered how the Olympics, a global spectacle, started? This video dives into the ancient Greek origins, revealing the rituals, competitions, and stories that sparked this legendary event. It's a sweltering afternoon in the Peloponnese, and you've just trudged for miles under the punishing Greek sun, swatting flies and trying not to trip over rocks older than democracy. Your feet are dusty, your stomach is loud, and your sandals, let's be honest, have given up. But as you round a bend in the olive groves, a strange sight hits you like a splash of chilled wine. Thousands of men, all shouting, sweating, and strangely reverent, are marching toward one place. Olympia, not the city, not even a village, really, just a sacred grove full of crickets, temples, and what looks like an aggressive amount of goat hair. But this isn't just any dusty hill. This is the heart of something enormous, something divine. This is where the Olympic Games begin. So before you jump into this sleepy story, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, but only if you actually enjoy and feel comfortable with the stories I tell here. And if you're awake enough to type, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who else is lying down under the stars somewhere out there. Now lie down and relax. Turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start ancient echo-boring journey together tonight. You're standing in the crowd at Olympia around 776 BCE, and the air smells odd. A mix of olives, sweat, sandalwood incense, and yes, goat. Lots of goat. There's chanting, rhythmic and low, and an ever-growing crowd has gathered around a wide, dusty altar made of ash. You rub your eyes, blink through the heat shimmer, and yep, those are goats being sacrificed, one after another. This is how the Olympic Games begin. The Games aren't just sports, after all. They're a sacred festival dedicated to Zeus, the thunder-happy king of the gods. The whole site of Olympia is a sprawling religious complex. Temples, treasuries, statues, and shrines, all built not to honor humans but to celebrate divine muscle. And yes, those sacrifices, completely normal. Ancient Greeks believed in kicking off any big deal with a little blood, a little fire, and a lot of smoke. The gods, apparently, were huge fans of barbecue. You inch closer to the altar of Zeus, a weird mound built not of stone, but ash, layers and layers of charred offerings piled up over centuries. You're told that this sacred barbecue pile has more history in it than most temples. People have been offering up bits of cow and goat here for generations. No, you don't get to taste anything. A priest, dressed in blinding white, holds up a double-bladed axe and shouts something that probably translates to, "Everyone stop chewing and pay attention." A final goat bleats, then silence. The animal is laid on the altar, the blade flashes, and you look away because you're still not quite ready for ancient Greek National Geographic. Ritual edition. As the offering burns, a procession begins. Men, elite citizens from various Greek city-states, march slowly, carrying olive branches, ceremonial vessels, and one guy with very uncomfortable sandals who definitely missed rehearsal. They're headed toward the Temple of Hera, where the Olympic flame will eventually be lit if lightning cooperates. Historians still argue whether this flame was actually continuous or more symbolic. But hey, it's the thought that counts. Here's something quirky you weren't expecting. The victors don't win money. Nope, they win a kotinos, a crown made from a wild olive branch cut from a sacred tree by a boy whose parents swear he hasn't sinned in years. This boy must use a golden knife, walk backward, and never speak. Because of course, you chuckle quietly. The idea of winning eternal glory and a tree twig is, well, humbling. But in ancient Greece, honor was everything. If your son won at Olympia, your family name echoed through time. Your city might even build a statue of him. Or, in one awkward case, of his biceps. Yes, those were real. The competitors, meanwhile, are already arriving. They've come from every direction: Sparta, Athens, Thebes, even distant colonies across the Aegean. But there's a catch. Only free Greek men are allowed to compete.
No foreigners. No Slavs.
No women. You'll hear more about that last part later. You overhear a conversation. Two elders debating whether a young athlete from Corinth trained too hard and offended Apollo. He looks like a horse, one mutters. The other nods. But he runs like a god. Typical Greek compliment. Nearby, sculptors are carving names into marble, records of past winners. Others build statues of Zanes, shame statues of athletes who cheated. Yes, even here, scandals made the headlines. One guy bribed a competitor. Another faked citizenship. The punishment? Public humiliation. Their names etched in stone forever, with inscriptions like, "I lied. Don't be like me." Honestly, you might prefer a fine. The mood shifts as the sun dips lower. Fires are lit. Wine is passed around. You're invited to join a small feast, not the big post-victory one, but a humble gathering by the athlete lodgings. The grapes are fresh, the bread coarse, and the olives suspiciously wrinkled. A young man recites Homer. You nod, but really you're just trying to figure out where you're sleeping tonight. Hint, it's not a bed. There's probably a patch of grass next to a goat. And as you lie down under the stars, listening to snores and distant flute music, you realize this isn't just a sports event. It's a celebration of life, death, gods, glory, and body odor. Welcome to Olympia. You wake to the sound of shouting. Not war cries, not prayers. Just one man yelling at another over an oil jug. You groggily sit up, brush olive leaves off your face, and try to remember where you are. Right, Olympia. The sacred grove, the ash altar, the goats. And now, apparently, the world's first morning gym session. Because here's the thing, everyone's naked. And not in the oops, forgot my toga way. This is on purpose, strategic, ritualistic, even celebrated. You stumble into the palestra, a wide rectangular training ground with sand-covered floors and colonnaded edges. It's already busy. Athletes are stretching, sparring, running in circles, and rubbing olive oil all over themselves with an intensity that's frankly unsettling. You quickly realize that in ancient Greece, training for the Olympics isn't just exercise, it's a full-time public performance. You try to fit in. A man, beefy, bearded, and somehow already sweating, hands you a small flask of oil and a strigil, a curved metal scraper. You blink at him. He grunts. You'll need this. You're expected to oil up, then scrape the sweat and dust off your body before training, and again afterward. This isn't vanity, it's hygiene, Greek style. Although historians still argue whether this oiling business was more about aesthetic ideals, religious purity, or just showing off your muscles in the most theatrical way possible. Maybe all three. Next comes warm-up, but forget light jogging. You're thrown into a whirlwind of jumps, discus throws, and terrifyingly accurate javelin hurls. One man launches his javelin so hard it sticks into a fig tree across the yard. You try to cheer but accidentally swallow a bug. Here's your reality check. You're not an athlete. Not even close. These men have trained for years. Some were raised in gymnasia, part school, part fitness camp, part philosophy club. Spartans, for example, start at age 7. Their daily schedule? wrestling, running, spear throwing, and being shouted at by older Spartans until they stop blinking. Not exactly a wellness retreat. You overhear a heated conversation about Milo of Croton, a legendary Olympian who trained by carrying a calf every day until it grew into a full-grown bull. Supposedly, he once split a tree trunk with his bare hands, and then got stuck inside it when the trunk snapped closed again. Quirky? Yes. Plausible? Historians still argue. Back in the training yard, you're paired with someone named Cleon. He's from Argos. He has zero chill. Before you can ask for a stretch break, he's tackling you into the sand. Grappling is part of training, even for non-wrestlers. You land hard, taste some dust, and when you blink, Cleon is already flexing for no one in particular. Eventually, a horn sounds, training's over. The men begin to wind down by pouring cold water over themselves from giant urns. You try to follow suit, but the urn slips and hits your foot. Several heads turn. You nod solemnly, as if this was a philosophical choice. The oil and dust on the ground, scraped off by hundreds of bodies, is gathered by attendants. And here's the truly weird part. That grime, known as gloios, is sometimes collected and sold as a kind of healing ointment. Yes, athlete sweat sludge, popular among fans, makes you appreciate modern deodorant, doesn't it? You limp toward a low stone wall, watching the others pack up their gear. There's no gym bag, just a small sack for oil, a sponge, and maybe a lucky talisman. One man kisses his before wrapping it in cloth. It's a small carved lion's tooth. Keeps the leg cramps away, he tells you. Science? No, but it's the Olympics. Who are you to argue? Across the field, musicians are tuning up. Tomorrow, the official trumpeters and heralds, who, yes, compete in their own events, will announce the game's start. You're told that in some years, heralds had to walk from city to city in blistering heat, dodging bandits and cranky farmers, just to proclaim the sacred truce and invite everyone. Unsurprisingly, the herald job has a high turnover rate. One man, lounging beside you, starts reciting Pindaric poetry, glorifying past champions in long, looping verses. You half listen, lulled by the rhythm. The poem praises a man who won 3 wrestling crowns, 1 chariot race, and, oddly, a baking contest. You think that last one might have been a translation error. The sun climbs higher. Your skin is hot, your muscles ache, and your pride has left the building. But something stirs in you. Some mix of awe, discomfort, and admiration. These athletes aren't just strong. They're devoted, focused. They treat this training ground like a temple. Each stretch, each throw, each sprint, it's an offering. Even with all the quirks, the oil, the nudity, the questionable hygiene, you begin to understand. The Olympics aren't just about winning. They're about becoming worthy of the gods' attention. Training here is a sacred rite, a transformation. Even if you're just the guy in the corner trying not to pull a hamstring. You stand, brush the sand from your legs, and take one last look at the palestra. Tomorrow, the games begin, but tonight you need rest, and maybe a prayer to whichever god handles pulled muscles. You wake up sore in places you didn't know could be sore. Every joint creaks. Every toe is rebelling. You lie on your back staring up at the olive branches swaying overhead, wondering if it's too late to sneak away and claim you were only here for the sightseeing. But it's too late. Trumpets are echoing across the grove, and the crowd is already forming. You shuffle toward the altus, the sacred center of Olympia. Today is no longer about sweaty grappling or near-death by javelin. Today, you're about to step into the beating heart of the divine drama, the religious ceremony, the parade of athletes, and the moment where Zeus himself takes center stage. The procession starts with a thud. Not metaphorically. Someone actually drops a giant ceremonial shield. The crowd pretends not to notice. A group of priests, followed by torchbearers and musicians, marches solemnly toward the Temple of Zeus, the largest structure in Olympia and home to something utterly jaw-dropping. A statue of Zeus so massive it barely fits inside. You wander in, eyes adjusting to the dim interior, and there it is. The statue of Zeus at Olympia, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Towering at around 40 feet tall, it's made of ivory and gold plates, seated on an elaborate throne, holding Nike, victory, in one hand and a scepter topped with an eagle in the other. His gaze, eternally calm, disapproving, like he knows what you did last summer. This massive god figure wasn't just there for decoration. People believed that Zeus himself could inhabit the statue, judging the purity of the games. Athletes swore sacred oaths before him. Cheaters feared his wrath. Poets sang of his thunderbolts. And here you are, staring up at a giant gold god and realizing your toenail situation is embarrassingly mortal. Outside, a lesser-known ceremony is underway. Animals are paraded around the temple, blessed, and offered up for sacrifice. You wince at the smell, burning fat and incense, but the crowd seems soothed by it. Children throw flower petals. An old woman mutters a prayer to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, in case Zeus is too busy. Then you hear it, a roll call of gods. Not just Zeus, not just Hera, but Apollo, Hermes, Artemis, Athena. Even Hades gets a solemn nod. Olympia may belong to Zeus, but this divine guest list is vast. One priest with impressive lungs lists off a litany of names as offerings are made. Historians still argue whether this was always the case, or if it evolved over time as new cults joined the Olympic party. You spot a small altar off to the side, dedicated to Pelops, a semi-mythical hero said to have founded the games. His story? Well, he cheats in a chariot race, wins a bride, and possibly boils someone. Classic Greek romance. The fact that he has a shrine shows just how blurry the line is between history and myth here. Just behind the Temple of Zeus is the Bouleuterion, where athletes come to take their sacred oaths. One by one, they swear to obey the rules, not bribe their way to victory, and train for the required 10 months. Yes, they actually had to promise not to cheat, because apparently even in a place with 12 gods watching, people still tried to cut corners. You're ushered into the crowd as the Hellenodikai, the Olympic judges, take their places in elevated seats. They wear purple cloaks and carry sticks. Not exactly referees in zebra stripes, but still terrifying. They're chosen from elite families, trained in Olympic law, and absolutely thrilled to disqualify someone for poor form or an illegal elbow jab. Nearby, a debate breaks out among scholars from rival city-states. One insists that Apollo is the real patron of the games. Another claims it's Herakles who founded everything, not Pelops. A third insists it's all metaphor and the gods are symbolic. That guy gets gently shoved into a bush. Meanwhile, artisans hawk their wares. You see carved figurines of gods, crude souvenirs, and one stall selling authentic athlete oil. You decide not to investigate. There's one final ritual before the competitions begin. The priests of Zeus lead a smaller group up a sacred hill to light a fire in honor of the gods and ensure the favor of Olympus for the duration of the games. The fire is symbolic, meant to carry the divine spark from mountaintop to arena. You try to climb along behind them but quickly give up. The sandals weren't made for hills. Suddenly, you notice the crowd hush. A young boy steps forward, carrying a branch of the sacred olive tree, the same kind that will be used for the winner's crown. He's barefoot, wrapped in a plain white tunic, and flanked by 2 attendants holding ceremonial blades. The tree itself, called the olive of the beautiful crown, grows near the temple of Zeus and is trimmed with great reverence. The olive branch he carries isn't just a plant. It's a living thread connecting gods, athletes, and glory. As he kneels and offers the branch to the high priest, you feel a breeze pass through the grove. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe, as a nearby elder whispers, it's Zeus exhaling approval. The games are now officially blessed. The gods are watching. The sacrifices have been made. The flame is lit. And you've somehow survived the most divine orientation week in history. Tomorrow, the competitions begin. But tonight, you rest under stars watched over by a 40-foot ivory god, still not entirely convinced he won't blink. It's just before dawn when you're woken not by sunlight or songbirds, but by a loud argument involving sandals, spilled wine, and something about a missing goat. You roll over, rub your eyes, and peek at the slowly brightening sky. Today's the first real day of the Olympic competitions, and already there's a crackling tension in the air. But your attention is immediately pulled toward a different kind of tension, the social kind. See, you've noticed something, or rather, you've not noticed something, specifically women. Olympia is full of men, competing, training, sacrificing, shouting, oiling each other up with alarming efficiency. But women, they're practically invisible, and there's a reason for that. At the ancient Olympic Games, women were barred from competing, and most were also banned from even watching. The rules are so strict, in fact, that if a married woman is caught peeking at the games, she could be thrown off a cliff. No, really, that was the actual punishment. You stare at the edge of a nearby hill and silently vow not to peek at anything you shouldn't. The only exception, a rare event called the Heraean Games, a separate festival held every 4 years in honor of the goddess Hera. These were races, not combat sports, and only unmarried girls were allowed to participate. They ran barefoot, hair loose, dressed in a short chiton, sort of like a tunic sliced at the thigh. You hear whispers that the Heraean races took place weeks ago. The winners didn't get olive crowns, but they were awarded a portion of a sacred cow and the chance to dedicate statues or offerings to Hera. You nod respectfully. That's a pretty solid prize, although it's unclear whether they actually ate the cow. Historians still argue over that detail, as they do with pretty much everything. Back in the present moment, you find yourself wandering near a quiet corner of Olympia, where the women who are here, priestesses, vendors, and family members, gather out of sight. You catch glimpses of women preparing garlands, boiling water, or watching nervously from behind pillars. You wonder how it must feel to be so close to the flame, yet kept from its center. But not all women follow the rules. You overhear an older man recounting the tale of Calipatira, a noblewoman whose son was competing in the games. She disguised herself as a male trainer because male trainers were allowed in the arena and entered the stadium. Her son won. Overcome with pride, she jumped up and her disguise fell away, revealing her true identity. Gasp. The judges were furious, but she was spared. Her family had a long Olympic legacy, and she was the daughter, sister, mother, and aunt of past champions. Still, rules changed afterward. Trainers now had to strip down too, just like the athletes. Because what else says fair play like mandatory nudity? You return to the main grounds, where the competitors are lining up for the first events. The stadium is packed, shoulder to sweaty shoulder, yet still no women in the seats. Instead, the priestess of Demeter Shamin, a mysterious exception to the no women rule, sits in a reserved spot near the altar. She alone, among all Greek women, is allowed to witness the games. No one really knows why. Some think it's because Demeter, as goddess of the harvest and cycles of life, represents something eternal and binding, something even the male-dominated games can't exclude. Others think it's political. Demeter's cult was strong in the region, and this was a compromise. Historians still debate her role, her power, even her identity. The announcer's voice cuts through your thoughts. The crowd surges. The first race is about to begin. But even now, your thoughts drift to the women behind the scenes. The ones weaving wreaths, preparing feasts, and hiding behind curtains just to watch their brothers or sons compete. And for a fleeting moment, you feel that the story of the Olympics isn't just about who stood in the arena, but also about who wasn't allowed to. You spend the rest of the day listening to stories between events. A young boy whispers that some women sneak peeks from the hills at night. A merchant says she knew a girl who beat her brothers in a foot race, but was never allowed to prove it on sacred ground. You smile softly, imagining what the games might have looked like if everyone had been invited. Later, as the stars rise again and the torches flicker across the dusty paths, you wander back toward the temple. There, etched faintly into the side of a low stone wall, you notice a tiny carving, a woman in mid-run, her hair flying behind her. There's no name,
no crown,
but she's still racing. The next morning greets you with bug bites, sore knees, and a Spartan shouting directly into your ear. You sit up fast enough to regret it. He grunts, hands you a damp cloth, and walks off without explanation. You assume this is some kind of warm welcome. Today is all about training like a Spartan. And by training, you mean possibly entering a coma from physical exhaustion. But hey, you made it this far. What's a little life-threatening cardio among ancient warriors? You're herded toward the gymnasium, the more formal training complex. It's larger than the palestra, and you now realize yesterday was just the appetizer. This place is the main course with extra bruises. Spartan athletes stand out like sore thumbs. If sore thumbs were sculpted from marble, never smiled, and probably hadn't had a hug since childhood. You've never seen humans with so many muscles or so few facial expressions. One of them is jogging backward while reciting Pythagorean theorems. You assume it's not required, but no one tells you otherwise. A sharply barked command sends everyone to drills. These aren't your local gym's gentle yoga sessions. They're sand-fueled gauntlets of sprints, lunges, push-ups, and terrifying stick-ducking exercises where you either dodge or get smacked in the ear. Spoiler, you don't dodge. Spartan trainers, lean, sun-scorched men who seem to be fueled entirely by scorn and figs, watch every move. You try to copy their breathing techniques, but mostly just wheeze dramatically while pretending you're meditating. Then comes the pentathlon prep, because 5 events at once just seems like a great idea when you haven't eaten anything but olives and possibly raw lentils. The pentathlon includes stadium race, a short sprint, wrestling, long jump, discus throw, and javelin. You mentally rank them from probably survivable to definitely not. You start with long jump, which looks simple until you realize the athletes use hand weights called halteres to swing and gain momentum. You watch a man leap like a gazelle. You leap like a startled goat. Then comes discus, which sounds fun until you see the thing. It's not a frisbee. It's a bronze dinner plate of doom. You try to lift it. Your shoulder cries. A Spartan child offers to help, and you quietly hate him. Javelin is next. You're handed a long, slightly wobbly spear and told to throw with purpose. You do. It flops 5 feet ahead like a surprised fish. The Spartans clap politely, which is worse than laughing. But the stadium race, that's when things get real. It's the main event of the pentathlon, the one people actually care about. Just one length of the stadium, around 192 meters, but it's full speed, no shoes, no lanes, and no mercy. The judge raises his arm. The crowd holds its breath. And you take off running. It's chaos. Sand kicks up in your eyes. Someone elbows you. You nearly trip over a guy named Theon who's already face down. But somehow, by some miracle or maybe pity, you don't come in last. Just second to last. Victory enough. The final trial is wrestling, and no, you don't get to skip it. You're paired with a mild-looking man named Dorios who smiles kindly. Then he flips you so fast your soul leaves your body. Greek wrestling is no joke. It's about throws, leverage, balance, no striking, no biting, and no gouging unless no one's looking. 3 falls win the match. You lose in 2. Dorios lets you keep your dignity by helping you up with a respectful nod, as if to say, you flopped with honor. Nearby, you overhear a bizarre story about Herakles, a famous Pancration champion, sort of the ancient version of mixed martial arts. In his final match, he was caught in a chokehold and passed out. But just before he lost consciousness, he dislocated his opponent's toe, forcing a surrender. Herakles was declared the winner posthumously. Yes, he died, and still got the olive crown. That's the kind of energy these guys bring to the sandpit. Historians still argue whether Herakles' story was embellished to inspire athletes. But honestly, even half of that tale is enough to make you double-check your life insurance. As you limp off the field, sweat-drenched and slightly concussed, a Spartan pats your back. You didn't die, he says. Good. For a Spartan, this is basically a standing ovation. Back at the training quarters, you collapse next to a fountain and gulp down a handful of dried figs someone left nearby. 2 old trainers debate the future of the games. One predicts Athens will take over. The other insists Spartans will always dominate. You nod in exhausted neutrality. And while your body may be destroyed, your mind drifts elsewhere, to what all this effort means. You're starting to understand that training here isn't just for the games. It's a test of discipline, identity, and pride. Each city-state sends its best not just to win, but to show the gods what kind of people they are. Whether it's elegant Athenian form or Spartan brutality, every muscle flexed is a kind of prayer. As the sun sets and the stars prick the sky, you shuffle back to your makeshift sleeping spot. Your bones ache, your pride is bruised, and you're pretty sure a beetle has claimed your sandal. But in the quiet of Olympia, under the watchful eye of Zeus, you feel something strange and rare. You feel ready. The morning air carries a different charge today. Even the birds seem to hush themselves, as if they too are waiting for something. You rise with the crowd, a little less sore, though still limping like someone who's wrestled a statue, and make your way to the stadium. This is it. No more practice. No more oaths. The Olympic Games officially begin, and it's loud. Trumpets blare. Not soft and regal, but sharp, startling, and honestly kind of smug. The official Olympic trumpeters and heralds, yes, they're real competitors, lead the opening ceremonies. It turns out they were chosen for the clarity and volume of their sound, not musical beauty. Think more ancient air horn, less lullaby. Behind them comes a long, slow procession of athletes, each one announced by name and city-state. The crowd roars for some, murmurs for others. You spot a small child trying to boo a rival athlete before being gently silenced by his mother. Olympic etiquette, it seems, starts young. You're squeezed into the throng lining the stadium's edge. There are no seats, no bleachers, just grassy banks and piles of humanity stacked against each other like olives in a jar. The stadium is an elongated oval carved into the earth, flanked by stone markers. At one end stands the balbes, the ancient starting line. A grooved slab of marble the runners must grip with their toes. The crowd hushes. A herald steps forward, announces the sacred truce, and gestures toward the sky. Somewhere, a priest finishes burning an offering to Zeus. Then, with another trumpet blast that probably startled a few goats back in town, the games officially commence. The first event? The stadium race, a 600-foot sprint. The same one you flopped your way through yesterday during training. Only now it's serious. The competitors line up, naked, glistening, tensed like bowstrings. One is so muscular it's unclear where his neck ends and his shoulders begin. Then silence. You could hear a pin drop, or at least a fig pit. The judge lowers his arm and they're off. Sand sprays, muscles ripple, feet thunder against packed earth. And before you can even blink, it's over. One man, a wiry blur from Ellis, bursts past the finish line, arms high. The crowd explodes in cheers. He won by inches, literal inches. But that's all it takes to become a stadium champion, the most prestigious title in the entire games. His name will be carved in stone. Poets will write about him. He'll never pay for wine again in his hometown. But it's not just running. As the day unfolds, you watch a cascade of competitions begin. Some familiar, some strange, and some that make you question the durability of the human body. There's the Dialos, a double stadium race, twice the length, twice the pain. And the Dolichos, a long-distance run where pacing is everything and cramps are your worst enemy. The Dolichos twists around the stadium multiple times, and runners are expected to maintain Olympic-grade dignity while visibly suffering. The crowd has their favorites. You overhear bets being whispered, olives, sheep, even land rights. One man confidently states that his cousin's neighbor's nephew once beat a Dolichos winner in a foot race to avoid paying taxes. You nod slowly and back away. Later in the afternoon, a group of hoplites, yes, soldiers in armor, line up for the hoplitodromos, a race in full military gear. Helmets, shields, and sometimes even greaves. It's both training and spectacle. You try to imagine a modern sprinter in steel-toed boots and chainmail and decide maybe these guys are onto something. As they thunder past, their shields gleaming in the sun, you wonder how many of them will later fight in real wars. The line between athlete and warrior here is thinner than you'd think. And sometimes victory in Olympia earns more than a wreath. It earns political power, respect, even command. One curious event is the Apobates, sort of a hybrid race where a charioteer drives at full speed while another man jumps off, runs beside the chariot, then jumps back on again. Because why not add extreme risk to extreme cardio? You watch one competitor nail the landing and remount so smoothly the crowd gasps. Another tries and ends up face first in the sand, emerging like a confused statue. He waves, the crowd applauds, and two attendants casually pick rocks out of his teeth. A strange but charming moment comes when a local herald recites the Olympic laws again, in case anyone forgot. It's all very formal until he trips over a rock and ends the sentence with, "And may your goats stay loyal." You're not sure if that's a legal clause or a personal blessing, but the crowd laughs politely. As the sun dips and shadows stretch long across the stadium, the final runners take their marks. A soft breeze carries the scent of roasted barley and something suspiciously like goat cheese. You're hungry, you're sunburned, but your heart is full. You realize something unexpected. This isn't chaos. It's ritualized chaos, meticulously scheduled, carefully watched, passionately celebrated. The ancient Greeks weren't just hosting games. They were enacting a vision of ideal human striving, a dance between body, honor, city, and God. You spot the stadium winner again, now surrounded by admirers. A small child offers him a figure. He accepts it with theatrical humility. Tomorrow he'll be crowned. Tonight he just wants a nap. So do you. You stagger out of the stadium, feet blistered, ears ringing with trumpets, and just a little in awe. And as you crawl under the same old olive tree for another night of sleep, you think, this isn't just a sporting event. It's the heartbeat of a civilization. The next morning, you're awakened not by trumpets or goats or philosophers having loud debates, but by the sound of feet, hundreds of them, pounding the packed earth in rhythm. You blink into the sunlight and see athletes warming up for the next round of events. Today is all about racing again, but with dirt, bruises, and absolutely no medals. There are no lanes, no fancy starting blocks, and certainly no Nike sponsorships. Just your body, the heat, and a stretch of sand where reputations are born and crushed like grapes in a wine press. You're back in the stadium, and today's big event is a return to the foot races. But this time, it's less ceremony, more combat by running. The stadium, Dialos, and Dalikos races continue, with even more competitors flooding in from surrounding city-states. There's more muscle, more ego, and somehow more olive oil. You try to squeeze through the crowd for a better view, accidentally bump into a man from Delphi who claims to be able to predict the winner. It's all in the knee angle, he says, stroking his beard. You nod an inch away. The stadium race starts again, quick and brutal. A man from Rhodes takes the lead and keeps it the whole 600 feet. He crosses the line, arms high, mouth open, and immediately vomits onto the sand. The crowd goes wild. You can't tell if it's admiration or collective empathy. Next comes the Dialos, the double sprint. This time, runners have to pivot around a turning post at the far end, usually a carved stone called the campter. And let's just say ancient Greek track design doesn't include soft corners or guardrails. One misstep and you're kissing gravel. You wince as two runners collide mid-turn. There's a tangle of limbs, a moment of silence. Then one guy stands up with what looks like a nose bending the wrong way. He raises a fist in triumph anyway. That's Olympic spirit. You catch an announcer praising a competitor's boar-like endurance. You're not sure whether that's a compliment, a roast, or a tragic misunderstanding of wildlife. The Dalikos is next, a grueling long-distance run. The race twists through the stadium and out into the surrounding fields. The runners vanish into the distance and, for a while, there's nothing to do but speculate. One woman bets a loaf of barley bread on a wiry kid from Argos. Another bets her cousin's goat. You're not sure she had permission. While waiting for the runners to return, you overhear two philosophers debating whether athletes are more divine than poets or just sweatier. One argues that speed is proof of favor from Hermes. The other mutters something about metaphors and sulks into his cloak. Finally, the runners return, gasping, staggering, absolutely drenched in sweat. The kid from Argos wins, collapsing just past the line, limbs twitching slightly. A judge leans over him and calmly states, "Victory." The crowd applauds. The goat is never mentioned again. But these races aren't just about physicality. They're about city-state pride. Every competitor isn't just racing for himself. He's racing for Thebes, Sparta, Athens, Corinth, or some obscure island you've never heard of. Victories are reported like military wins. In some cities, champions are even exempt from taxes for life. Yes, you heard that right. And cheating? Oh, it happens. At one point, there's a suspiciously fast man from Syracuse. A little too fast. You see a judge pull him aside and question his status. Did he train long enough? Did he bribe someone? Did he use winged sandals? Turns out, his cousin bribed another athlete to fake an injury and drop out. Caught. He's immediately disqualified and fined a hefty sum. Part of that money, ironically, will go to funding a shame statue, a bronze figure placed along the entrance path to Olympia with a plaque declaring his crime. You walk past a few of them later. The inscriptions are brutal. This man deceived the gods and the games. Let no one trust him. Ouch. You spot the Hellenodikai, the judges, huddled together discussing penalties. They take this seriously. In fact, many trained for years before being allowed to judge. Their job isn't just calling races. It's maintaining sacred integrity. They're part referees, part priests, part bureaucrats with excellent sandals. Between events, vendors appear with trays of dried fruit, goat cheese, and something suspiciously sticky called honey mud. You try a bite. Tastes like regret with notes of fig. Back at the starting line, there's an unscheduled pause. One athlete has refused to compete, citing bad omens from last night's dreams. A few others nod in agreement. The owls flew east. One whispers, always a bad sign. You squint at the sky, nothing but clouds. Historians still debate how seriously athletes took omens, but it's clear that dreams, bird paths, and thunder direction played a big role in decision-making. So much so that Olympia had official seers on hand called mantes, who interpreted signs from sacrificial animal livers. That's right, livers. Nothing says ready to run like a prophetic spleen. As the last races wrap up, the sun starts to dip. The crowd is sunburned, happy, and buzzing from all the chaos. The winners today won't be crowned until the final ceremonies, but their names are already echoing through the grove. Poems are being composed. Toasts are being raised. Someone is already carving a mini statue. You drag yourself away from the stadium, legs aching just from watching. Another day is done. Another step deeper into this living, breathing machine of pride, performance, and piety. You pass a boy sprinting barefoot toward the training yard, holding a wooden baton and grinning ear to ear. You ask him why he's running. Because one day, he pants, they'll carve my name into the stone. And somehow you don't doubt him. By now, you've adjusted to the rhythm of Olympia. Days filled with sweat and shouts. Nights with murmured prayers and the scent of sacrificial smoke. But today, the tone shifts. The crowd gathers not for running or long jumping, but for something more primal, more theatrical, and arguably much more dangerous. Wrestling, boxing, and pancration. You feel it the moment you reach the arena. The air is heavier, the conversation's quieter. Even the jokes feel nervous. You can practically taste the adrenaline. These are not just sports. They're controlled chaos, ritualized violence to honor the gods and test the limits of the human body. The first match is wrestling, pale in Greek. Unlike modern versions, there are no weight classes. You could be a wiry youth from Delos up against a hulking Spartan with biceps like temple columns. The match starts with hand slaps, careful circling, and then, bam! A shoulder flips so fast you barely see it. The crowd roars. Dust flies. Victory requires 3 clean throws. No punching, no biting, no breaking bones, theoretically. Though how strictly those rules are followed depends entirely on whether the judge is paying attention or blinking. You watch one match where a slippery little guy from Corinth manages to flip a much larger man using what looks suspiciously like a kick. The judges debate. A philosophical argument breaks out nearby over the definition of throw. The judges let it stand. The Corinthian bows with flair. The big guy mutters something that sounds like a curse involving figs. But wrestling is only the warm-up. Next comes boxing picks. And if you're imagining gloves, forget it. Ancient Greek boxers wrapped their hands in leather thongs called hymantes. No padding, no mercy. Some versions even had metal or knots sewn into them for maximum damage. The boxers step forward, flexing dramatically. One taps his own jaw like he's daring the other to aim for it. You can already feel a headache forming just from watching. And then it starts. No rounds, no breaks, no referee stepping in. They go until someone surrenders or falls unconscious. Or worse, one punch lands with a sound that reminds you of dropping a watermelon. The recipient staggers, blood flowing freely from his nose, but steadies himself and charges forward like a wounded bull. He lands a retaliatory uppercut that sends his opponent to the ground in a heap. The judge pauses, counts with his fingers, yes, literally, and declares the victor. The winner raises his fists, his eyes already swelling. The loser is helped away, groaning, leaving a trail of blood behind like it's part of the ceremony. You ask a local if anyone ever died during the games. He shrugs. Only the ones who weren't good enough. Which brings us to Pancration. If wrestling is strength and boxing is power, Pancration is total war. It's a no-holds-barred mashup of the two, where almost anything goes. Striking, grappling, tripping, choking, all allowed. Only biting and eye gouging are forbidden, technically, but enforcement is inconsistent. A voice announces the competitors. One from Athens, tall and lean. The other from Sparta, square-jawed and built like a war god. The Athenian bows politely. The Spartan stares forward like he's already planning your funeral. The match begins, and within seconds, it's chaos. Legs wrap around torsos. Elbows fly. One man is flipped, pinned, somehow escapes, then leaps up and kicks the other in the ribs. There's no grace here, only efficiency and survival. You watch, transfixed. The Athenian is fast, dodging, using angles. The Spartan is brutal, hammering forward like he's trying to punch through time itself. Finally, the Athenian catches the Spartan in a rear choke, locking his forearm under the throat. The crowd leans forward. The Spartan thrashes, his face turning a remarkable shade of purple. For a moment, you think it's over. But then, with a roar, the Spartan throws himself backward, smashing both of them into the ground. Dust explodes. A brief silence. And then a hand rises. The Spartan, victorious. The crowd erupts, not just in applause, but in awe. This isn't just sport. It's myth in motion. You glance around and notice a few older men nodding, as if seeing echoes of Herakles, the legendary hero who, according to some traditions, invented Pancration himself. Historians still argue whether the sport was divine gift or brutal accident. Either way, it's unforgettable. You stumble away from the ring, heart pounding, even though all you've done is spectate. It's one thing to read about ancient violence. It's another to see it performed publicly with divine approval. You pass a statue of Theagenes of Thasos, a legendary boxer said to have won over 1,400 victories. Legend claims he once punched a statue, and the statue later killed him when it fell on him. People still left offerings at its base for years. You eye the marble warily. Later that evening, you find yourself seated near a group of retired athletes, scarred, bandaged, but glowing with quiet pride. They share stories over bread and dried meat, laughing at injuries like they were old love letters. You overhear one man explaining how, after his Olympic victory, his home city pulled down a section of the wall because no city with a man like this needs protection. You're not sure if that's exaggeration or policy. With ancient Greece, it could easily be both. Before bed, you run into a young athlete nursing a broken nose. You ask if it was worth it. He grins through his crooked face. "I stood in the dust with heroes," he says, "and as you lie beneath the stars that night, the distant roars still echoing in your ears, you start to understand the ancient logic of it all. This was never just about victory. It's about pain made sacred." The morning is calm, eerily so.
No shouting, no trumpet blasts.
Just a gentle breeze through the olive trees and the soft rustle of sandals on stone paths. You stretch your battered limbs and wonder if perhaps, miraculously, it's a rest day. But no, it's chariot racing day. You follow the tide of people toward the Hippodrome, Olympia's horse racing track, tucked just southeast of the main stadium. It's massive, nearly 600 meters long, flat and dusty, framed by low earthen embankments. There's no official seating, just hills and elbows. You stake out a spot near the far turn, where the crashes happen. You've heard stories, and there it is, the unmistakable thunder of hooves. Chariots, drawn by teams of 4 horses, barrel down the track in clouds of dust. The drivers, called hiniochoi, are tiny compared to the animals they command, wrapped in tight tunics and gripping long reins looped around their waists. Yes, their waists. If they crash, they often get dragged unless they cut themselves free in time. You glance at the ground. A small, curved knife glints in the sand. You quietly hope it's just for show. The first race begins with a trumpet blast and a thunderous release from the starting gates, which are sophisticated enough to make modern engineers blink. The horses lunge forward as if fired from catapults, and instantly the arena becomes chaos. Dust fills the air. Spectators scream. Hoofs pound like war drums. The chariots veer dangerously close, their wheels just inches apart. The sharp turn approaches, the Nissa, a pillar at the end of the track, and the crashes begin. One driver misjudges the angle. His chariot flips, horses flail, and the crowd gasps. Miraculously, he emerges coughing and spitting dirt, one sandal missing. He cuts the reins from his waist just in time. The horses, now chariotless, continue galloping majestically into the olive grove. That's their problem now. Chariot racing is brutal, but oddly, the drivers aren't the ones who get the glory. The true winner is the owner of the horses. Often aristocrats, generals, or even royalty, these owners rarely set foot on the track. But when their team wins, they're celebrated like conquering heroes. You hear a whisper in the crowd, "That's a Spartan team." Another responds, "No, Athenian." A third says, "They were bred in Thessaly." It's hard to tell where the lines of pride begin or end. What's certain is this: the horse races are about prestige, wealth, and who can raise the finest beasts in Greece. You hear about Caniska, a Spartan princess who wasn't allowed to compete as an athlete, but entered her horses instead. Her chariot team won, twice, and she became the first woman in history to be declared an Olympic victor. Her victory was carved in stone. Literally, you vow to find that statue later. Next up is the Sonorous, a two-horse chariot race even harder to control, since the team is smaller and the margin for error even tighter. One driver, a wiry man with a wild beard, somehow balances his entire body over the axle, steering with just one hand. The crowd goes wild. His victory lap includes throwing figs into the audience. You catch one. It's overripe. Then comes the bareback riding, known as Herakles.
No saddles, no stirrups.
Just humans clinging to galloping horses with inner thigh strength that could crush a boulder. One rider, just a boy, loses control mid-race but somehow remounts his horse at full speed. A move so improbable it sparks debate in the crowd over whether Hermes possessed him. Historians still argue about the age limits for riders. Some say teenagers were preferred for their lightweight. Others insist adult men often raced. All agree, though, the riders were often slaves, while the honor still went to their owners. You ask someone how they train for this kind of chaos. The answer, you don't. You survive it. As dust settles between races, an announcer recites the lineage of a particularly famous horse, tracing it back 6 generations. People nod solemnly. You pretend to understand, though you still can't tell one horse from another unless it bites someone. You meet a man from Thessaly who claims to speak fluent horse. He demonstrates by whinnying in several tones. No one challenges him. Between races, poets perform quick verses about heroic charioteers and divine horses. One boy recites a tale of a steed that refused to race after its master died, until it saw a rival team gloating. The horse then ran on its own and won the race in its owner's memory. You blink. The crowd blinks. It's so touching. Someone weeps into a tunic. Later, you catch sight of the victory ceremony for the team from Argos. The owner isn't even there. He's busy accepting gifts from his city's council. But his charioteer receives a laurel wreath, a jug of oil, and a bruised shoulder. You ask the winning driver how he feels. He holds up his hand, wrapped, bleeding, fingers crooked, and says, "I'm just glad I didn't die." Fair. You wander toward the stables. Horses are being brushed, fed, kissed, and sung to like they're minor gods. One groom is even burning incense. You ask if it's for luck. "No," he replies. Flies. As the sun sinks lower, casting long shadows across the trampled dirt, you watch the last chariot of the day roll past. The driver stands tall, reins slack, as if he's conquered not just the track but fate itself. You sit back and breathe in the scent of crushed grass, sweat, and something vaguely equine. Chariot day is over. But the image of horses flying across the earth like thunder made flesh stays with you. And as you lie down to rest, soar in new ways just from watching, you realize something. The Greeks didn't invent the wheel, but they did invent the idea of racing it to glory. You wake up, soar in places you didn't know could feel, soar just from spectating. Your muscles ache in sympathy. Your ears still ring faintly with the thunder of hooves, and your dreams were all just horses circling endlessly in dust. Today, though, your journey takes a more reflective turn. Not all Olympic glory happens in the arena. Some of it happens with words, with memory, and with stone. Welcome to the world of Olympic fame and post-victory immortality. You start your morning wandering past the Altus, Olympia's sacred sanctuary, a grove of temples, statues, and shrines so dense and overwhelming that it feels like stepping into the dreams of marble sculptors. Towering above the treetops, the colossal statue of Zeus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, watches over everything like a cosmic referee. It's said to be 40 feet tall, made of gold and ivory, seated on a throne with painted eagles, lions, and mythological scenes wrapped around his body like a comic strip carved by gods. You're not allowed inside the temple, but you peer through the cracks and feel a strange weight, like Zeus is daring you to blink first. Everywhere you turn, there are statues of former champions, some life-size, some larger than life, all smug. Each one is a gift from a city-state, a family, or sometimes the victor themselves, erected to preserve their name long after their bones have turned to olive mulch. You squint at one base and read, Leon of Naxos, who outran even Hermes in the Stadion. Modesty, never heard of her. One statue is particularly detailed, down to the veins in his forearms and the suspiciously perfect hair. You ask a passing artist if these were accurate. He shrugs. We improve what the gods clearly forgot. But it's not just statues. Victors also receive olive wreaths, cut from the sacred wild olive tree, the Calistephanos, that grows behind Zeus's temple. The wreath is both crown and contract, a symbol of divine approval, and a reminder that you now represent the best of all Greeks. No pressure. You overhear a bard composing a victory ode, a eponychion if you're feeling fancy, for a boxer from Elis. The lyrics are dramatic. He broke jaws for honor, spat teeth in praise of Apollo, and now eats grapes as a god among men. Catchy. Poets like Pindar made entire careers crafting elaborate praise songs for Olympic winners. Some were commissioned by families. Others were gifts from cities. Each poem immortalized not just the athlete, but the virtue of their birthplace. Historians still debate whether the poems were ever sung or simply recited over wine and arguments. And that's just the start of the post-Olympic perks. Victors returning home didn't walk. They rode through broken walls, sometimes literally. In cities like Thebes and Athens, citizens would tear down part of the city wall to welcome their champions back, symbolizing that with such strength inside, no defense was needed. You hear one story, possibly exaggerated, probably not, about a runner who won 3 races and had his taxes canceled for life. Another was offered marriage to the governor's daughter, 5 goats, and his weight in olive oil. You briefly consider a career change, but not all champions are remembered equally. You come across a statue base that once held a figure, now missing. The inscription is half erased, and locals whisper the man was caught cheating years later. His memory was removed, literally defaced. You feel a chill. Immortality has conditions. You pass by the Zanes, a line of bronze statues paid for by the fines of cheating athletes. Each one bears the name of the disgraced, a sort of ancient Greek wall of shame. You read one aloud, Eupelos of Thessaly, who bribed boxers and lost the favor of Zeus. Brutal. In between the monuments, vendors sell trinkets. Tiny olive crowns, figurines of wrestlers, and jars of sand, collected from the stadion itself. You're not sure about the authenticity, but the enthusiasm is charming. One boy offers to carve your name into a pebble for a few obols. You let him, mostly because he looks like he could be the next Pancration star. As you walk, you begin to understand the deeper purpose of all this glory crafting. It's not just ego, it's a social contract. The athlete trains, competes, suffers. In return, the city immortalizes him, not because he is divine, but because he dared to approach the divine. To win in Olympia was to become a living legend, and after death, possibly something more. Many believed Olympic champions earned a kind of semi-divine status, that their names echoed through the underworld halls of Hades like incantations. Some cities even buried their champions in temples, as if inviting the gods to share real estate. There are stories, again debated, of champions whose tombs never grew weeds. One, it said, still smells of laurel after 200 years. You lean in close to a particularly old stone. Smells more like goat. As evening falls, you return to the edge of the stadium, where the latest victors are being paraded through with torches and cheers. They wave, exhausted and proud. Somewhere, a lyre plays a tune you swear you've heard in your dreams. A mother whispers her son's name, watching the athletes with eyes that burn. A boy balances on his father's shoulders, mimicking the throwing motion of a discus. Somewhere out there, more legends are being born, quietly, in the backs of the crowd. You lie down later with the stars above and the statue of Zeus looming somewhere behind you. You're just a visitor, just a dreamer passing through. But for a moment, watching names carved into stone and poems sung to firelight, you almost believe it. Glory doesn't die. It just takes a nap between festivals. The festival isn't winding down just yet. In fact, the energy shifts again today. You've seen the raw athleticism, the chaos of chariots, and the glory carved into marble. But now it's time to peer under the veil and see the other face of Olympia. Ritual, religion, and reverence. Because here, every race and every throw was always meant for someone else. You shuffle out of your sleeping nook and follow the scent of incense, roasted meat, and anticipation toward the heart of the sanctuary, the Temple of Zeus. No matter how many times you pass it, it still manages to intimidate you. Its Doric columns rise like ancient ribs, holding up the sky, and the massive golden statue within, yes, that statue, seems to pulse with some energy beyond understanding. This isn't just decoration. This is where the games began and ended, in worship. At the base of the temple, priests and sacrificers prepare the day's central ritual, the hecatomb, an offering of 100 oxen to Zeus. You join the swelling crowd, watching as each animal is led toward the altar, draped in ribbons and garlands. There's a strange quiet here, respectful, hushed, but buzzing. You're told that only a portion of the meat is actually burned for the gods. The rest? Feast time. Communal eating is one of the festival's pillars, a way to bond city-states that might otherwise be stabbing each other by next month. As the oxen are led up one by one, a priest flicks sacred barley over their backs. Another chants an invocation, calling on Zeus the Thunderer, the all-seeing, the wreath-giver. The blade is clean. The blood spills on marble. No one flinches. If this feels intense, that's because it is. The Olympics weren't just a sports festival. They were a pan-Hellenic religious ceremony, first and foremost. Every event honored Zeus, and every victor's wreath was a token of divine favor. Competing here wasn't just an athletic risk, it was a spiritual one. You overhear two travelers debating the origin of the games. One insists they were founded by Herakles after he completed his 12 labors. Another says they began as a funeral rite for Pelops, a mythical king who won his bride in a chariot race, with some help from divine sabotage. A third mutters about prehistoric cults and moon calendars. Historians still argue which version is real, but the truth, like most Greek myths, is a tangled olive branch of half history, half legend. What matters is that the games are sacred. Period. You walk past the ash altar of Zeus, a mound of blackened offerings collected for centuries, higher than your shoulders. It's made not of stones, but of the burned bones of thousands of animals, a smoky fossil of generations worth of prayers. Nearby, young athletes toss flowers at the base of the altar. One whispers a name under his breath. A brother, a father, maybe even a rival. Whatever the story, you don't interrupt it. At the same time, far from the public rituals, other offerings unfold quietly. You pass an old woman tying a lock of hair to a laurel branch, a soldier pouring oil at the foot of a tree, a merchant lighting a clay lamp with shaking hands. These are personal devotions, made in hope or thanks. To Zeus, Hera, Nike, even obscure local gods you've never heard of. Here at Olympia, the divine guest list is long. You hear talk of omens. A priest saw a raven fly north before sunrise. A goat refused to eat its grain. One charioteer has pulled out of tomorrow's race after a particularly vivid dream involving a snake and a wine jug. You don't ask. Later in the afternoon, a procession begins. Priests, judges, athletes, and musicians win their way around the Temenos, the sacred precinct. They stop at altars, sing hymns, pour wine, and toss grain. You try to keep up, but your legs still remember the pentathlon from 5 days ago and protest with every step. In the processional line, you spot the Hellenodikai, the Olympic judges, dressed in purple robes today. More priest than referee now. They sprinkle wine and repeat the oaths from the opening ceremony. For them, the games are a sacred duty, not just a logistical headache. And then, just before sunset, the crowd shifts toward the Temple of Hera, the smaller, older, and distinctly different. There, the women who serve as priestesses of Hera perform a quieter ceremony. You're told it's in honor of the goddess's protection over the city, the marriage bond, and the cycle of life. And it's here that the Olympic flame, yes, that iconic symbol, is kindled. Using a mirror and the rays of the sun, the priestesses light a fire, which will be passed on to smaller altars around the site. It flickers, then blazes. You're told this is the fire of beginnings, the warmth of divine watching, the reminder that every record broken and muscle torn happens under the god's gaze. Even the athletes know it. Later that night, you pass a group of runners praying together before bed, hands clasped, whispering to Hermes for swiftness, to Apollo for grace, to Zeus for favor. One of them cries quietly. No one mocks him. And maybe this is what makes the Olympics different from just sports. It's not just about who is fastest or strongest. It's about why you run, about what you're proving not just to others, but to the divine. You finally return to your patch of ground beneath the olive trees, the scent of incense still clinging to your tunic. Above you, the stars pulse like distant embers. The gods are watching. They always have been. And maybe, just maybe, you're not entirely a stranger here anymore. Dawn stirs slowly today. Even the roosters seem hesitant. Perhaps Olympia itself is finally tired. You rise quietly, stretching your limbs, brushing off the faint coating of dust and sleep from your skin. The festival is nearing its end, and there's a subtle change in the air, a kind of reverent hush before the final crescendo. But don't get too comfortable. You haven't seen everything yet. Today, you find yourself heading toward a different kind of spectacle, one less about glory and more about proving how much punishment a human body can withstand. The final bouts of Pancration and the awarding of victories. The stadium is quieter now, though the tension in the air is thick. This isn't day one energy. This is the last day of the Olympic festival. Final chances, last throws, ultimate fights. You feel it in the way people talk. Less rowdy, more focused, as if even the crowd has become a little more sacred. You squeeze into your usual spot, now familiar as an old sandal. The Pancration finals begin with an introduction that feels more like a eulogy. The announcer lists off each remaining competitor's victories, their hometowns, and, dramatically, their injuries. It's like listening to a butcher list cuts of meat. Two finalists step forward. One from Argos, massive, scarred, breathing like a bull. The other from Samos, lean, calculating, eyes like wet flint. They bow, grip each other's forearms, and the match begins. The crowd is silent. What follows is the most brutal, beautiful thing you've seen all week. No music, no commentary, just grunts, gasps, and the crunch of human collision. There are moments when you're sure someone's arm will break. A knee bends the wrong way. A tooth flies. The two men become a blur of sweat and grit and sheer, unholy endurance. Then it happens. The Samian traps the Argive in a chokehold. A deep one. You can see the veins bulging in the Argive's forehead. The crowd leans forward, and then, tap, it's over. The Samian stands barely, chest heaving. The Argive lies still, then lifts one arm weakly and claps. 1, 2, 3 times. The crowd erupts, not just for the victor, but for the loser too, because here, losing with honor is still winning. You spot a group of Spartan boys watching from the sidelines, not speaking, just staring, absorbing. Their time will come. As the match ends, the judges begin preparing for what might be the most sacred moment of the entire festival, the crowning of the victors. Unlike the chaos of the games, this part unfolds with perfect ritual. The athletes, still slick with oil and triumph, are brought to the temple of Zeus, where a procession of Hellenodikai leads them in silence. You trail behind the crowd. The athletes line up in front of the Kalistephanos, the sacred wild olive tree. The leaves shimmer like bronze in the sunlight. A priest, using a golden knife, carefully trims one branch. This is no ordinary wreath. This crown is believed to carry divine favor, a direct blessing from Zeus himself.
No gold.
No silver, just olive leaves, twisted into a circle. But those leaves can change a life. Each victor steps forward. Their name is called, their city-state, their event. A judge places the wreath on their head, and for one shining moment, they are more than mortal.
No trumpets. No firework displays.
Just the whisper of leaves, the murmur of prayers, and the quiet awe of everyone watching. You see the boy from Argos who won the Dolichos days ago. He's trembling, not from fear, from joy, from the understanding that this moment is eternal. You overhear a judge remind a nervous athlete, "This isn't the end of your glory. It's the beginning of your duty." Heavy words for a crown of twigs. You wander to the Philippion, a circular temple built by Philip of Macedon to honor his family's victories. You remember someone whispering that his son, Alexander the Great, once raced here, or maybe just watched. Either way, history hangs like mist. Statues of winners line the walkways. Some faces are chipped, others still perfect, all frozen in that single moment of triumph. You wonder which ones were humble and which were insufferable. Probably both. You stop at the statue of Diagoras of Rhodes, an Olympic boxer so revered that when his two sons won their own events, they lifted him on their shoulders, paraded him through the stadium, and the crowd shouted, "Die now, Diagoras, for you have nothing left to live for." It sounds dark, but they meant it as the highest honor. Spoiler, he didn't die. Historians still argue about whether Olympic victors were truly immortalized, or whether their stories simply survived better than others. But looking at these monuments, these wreaths, and the way children recite names of long-dead wrestlers like their old friends, it's hard not to believe it just a little. As sunset dips low across Olympia, the victory feast begins. Long tables, roasted meats, clusters of grapes, music played on lyres and flutes. Poets shout over each other. Some athletes are already passed out under tables. One is explaining, slurred but passionate, that his javelin throw defied Apollo himself. You toast him with watered-down wine and nod gravely. In the distance, fireworks? No, just someone dropping a torch into a cooking pot. Still festive. And as the sky goes dark, the festival begins to fold inward. Tents are taken down. Offerings are quietly gathered. Vendors tally their earnings. The sacred fire still burns, but smaller now. One last match. One last poem. One last name carved into stone. And final moment, as you walk once more past the stadium, past the statues, past the temples and triumphs, you find yourself whispering a name. Not yours, not even someone you know, just a name from earlier in the week. A boy, a runner, a nobody who dared to be something. You whisper it again, just in case the gods didn't hear the first time. The last full day in Olympia dawns with a kind of nostalgic stillness, as if the entire sanctuary knows this grand celebration is drawing to a close. But don't roll up your travel blanket just yet. There's one more group you've hardly paid attention to, and today, their presence becomes impossible to ignore. The spectators, the traitors, and the outsiders. Because while the Olympic Games are about the athletes, the gods, and the pursuit of immortal glory, they're also a massive social and economic circus, and you've been walking right through it this whole time. You step away from the stadium and head toward the market area. An improvised sprawl of tents, stalls, and carts that's grown like ivy in the spaces between temples and training grounds. It's a chaotic patchwork of colors, smells, accents, and arguments, and it's glorious. This isn't just a marketplace. It's a festival within the festival, a wild bazaar of olive oil vendors, storytellers, sculptors, mercenary recruiters, fishmongers, gamblers, philosophers, and people trying to sell you suspiciously shiny goat teeth as authentic Spartan luck charms. You pause by a man carving mini statues of Herakles. He's missing 3 fingers and insists they were taken in a pancration match, not a carving accident. His statues look like potatoes with clubs. You buy one anyway. A few steps later, you're nearly trampled by a group of philosophers from Athens, arguing loudly about whether physical strength is more valuable than moral virtue. One insists virtue is strength, while another is trying to climb onto a crate to demonstrate intellectual dominance. You move on before the metaphor gets too literal. And yes, foreigners are everywhere. While only Greeks can compete, everyone seems to attend. You pass Phoenician traders in dyed robes, Egyptians selling amulets, and even a red-bearded man from somewhere far north, maybe Thrace, who's staring at the temple of Zeus like he just saw a mountain blink. One woman from Cyrene is hawking perfumes. Another offers wine spiced with cinnamon from lands beyond the sun. You sip it. It burns. You regret it, but also maybe not. And then there's the food. Roasted goat, figs dripping with honey, barley cakes stuffed with herbs, skewers of fish so salty you feel your dreams get thirstier. You chew slowly, watching a vendor negotiate with 2 Corinthians over the last leg of lamb like it's a political treaty. Historians often debate how commercial the games really were. Some argue Olympia was strictly sacred, no selling allowed within the altus. Others point out that deal-making happened everywhere else, and that even Plato complained about the noise of the marketplace drowning out prayers. Either way, the result is the same. This is ancient capitalism wrapped in a toga. You wander into a tent with rows of painted ceramic vases, each depicting Olympic scenes. Runners, jumpers, javelin throwers, wrestlers. The potter is from Athens and proudly tells you he's been sketching the games since boyhood. You ask if he competes. He laughs. I compete to pay rent. Back outside, a bard is performing a retelling of the Trojan War, complete with puppets. His Achilles is suspiciously shirtless, and his Hector keeps getting dropped. Children cheer. A group of bored young athletes take bets on how long the performance will last. One girl predicts with eerie accuracy that the puppets will catch fire. They do. Then there's the gambling. Despite being technically forbidden, you can't walk 10 steps without someone whispering odds in your ear. Which runner will win? How many chariots will crash? Will that one wrestler fall asleep mid-match again? You see coins, olive oil, and even a small pig change hands. A man bets his wife's comb. She doesn't look amused. You pass a booth with hand-drawn maps of Olympia, exaggerated so all the temples look bigger than the stadium. The vendor claims it's spiritually accurate. Another offers to engrave your name on a tiny piece of marble, so you, too, can be remembered like a champion. And then, amid all this noise and delight, you come across the quiet zones. Places where people sit under trees, nap, or share food in circles. Friends reunite. Families cheer their distant cousins. Athletes rest their heads in the laps of their trainers. One man is playing a reed flute. Another softly sings to his sleeping infant. This too is the Olympics. Not just the competition or the ceremony, but the coming together of Greeks from every walk of life. For these few days, Sparta doesn't war with Athens. Corinth doesn't feud with Argos. Even bitter enemies share cups of wine under the olive trees. You spot a man telling a story to a group of children. He's describing the founding of the games, not the version with Herakles, but the one where Zeus wrestled Kronos, defeated him, and established Olympia in celebration. And so, he says, every match, every race, every leap is a reminder. Even the gods must earn their crowns. As dusk approaches, the market begins to wind down. Traders pack up. Poets drink a little too much. Somewhere, someone's goat has gone missing. A man from Rhodes is trying to convince a priest that a small wrestling statue winked at him. The priest says it's probably the wine. You realize you've spent the day without seeing a single contest, and yet you've learned just as much about Olympia as you did in the stadium. Because behind every throw, every punch, every olive wreath, there's a web of lives, laughter, and longing. Tomorrow, people will leave. City-states will go back to arguing, fighting, taxing, and occasionally invading each other. But tonight, for one last time, everyone here is just Greek, unified, present. You sit beneath a fig tree and eat something sticky and sweet. The stars come out, and a voice nearby recites a poem about victory, not as a prize, but as a path. You don't remember the words. Sleep is harder tonight, not because of the sounds. Olympia has grown quieter, but because of what you know is coming, departure. This is your last full night in the heart of the ancient world's greatest celebration. Tomorrow, the roads open again. The truce lifts. The gods go silent. But not yet. The torchlight dances across the trees as you take one final walk through the sacred grounds. Olympia feels different now. Emptier, yes, but also heavier. like the place itself is sighing, releasing the weight of 1,000 chants, footsteps, and screams. At the center of it all, the Temple of Zeus stands stoic, unmoved by time or emotion. The statue inside still gleams, though the sun has long set. You stop for a moment and whisper a thank you, not for anything in particular, just because it feels right. Today isn't about competition. It's about closure. The final rituals are already underway. You make your way to the council house, the Bouleuterion, where athletes gathered before the games began to swear their oaths. Now they return to offer thanks, confess regrets, and in some cases, quietly settle disputes. A runner confesses he tried to cut corners, literally, on the stadium race. A discus thrower admits his third throw was partially wind-assisted and may be guided by the blessing of an unusually persuasive priest. The judges listen, nod, and let most of it go. There's a mercy in endings. Outside, a poet from Thebes recites the last lines of a week-long epic he's been composing. It's about a boy who loses every match but earns the gods' favor anyway for his courage. The moral? Lose to men and you fall. Lose to gods and you rise. You hear applause, gentle, real. Someone places a laurel branch at his feet. There's one last procession tonight. The closing march of athletes and judges through the Altis.
No fanfare.
Just torches, footsteps, and silence. Each athlete carries a token from their event. An unbroken javelin, a worn strap of leather from boxing, a handful of stadium dust. You walk with them, though no one really notices. At this point, you're part of the place. One more sandal print in 1,000 years of footsteps. The march circles around the ash altar of Zeus, where offerings from the week still smolder faintly. The air smells of smoke and oil and memory. Each athlete places their token into the fire. One boy from Delphi hesitates. His token is a broken strap from his sandal. He tripped in the race, lost, and limped away unnoticed. Now, with quiet dignity, he drops the strap into the flame. The boy next to him, a wrestler with a broken nose and 3 victories, pats him on the back. Nothing is said. Everything is understood. Later, you drift to the edge of Olympia, past the statues and tents now half-packed. The sounds of carts creaking and horses snorting carry in the breeze. Someone sings a lullaby in a language you don't recognize. Maybe Egyptian, maybe just Old Greek, too slurred to tell. You sit beside an old man, a merchant from Corinth who didn't sell much, but smiles anyway. "This was my 5th games," he tells you. "I don't come to make money. I come to remember how beautiful people are when they try." You don't reply. You just sit with him, watching the last of the fires die down. Behind you, a scribe hammers names into a slab of stone. Victors, judges, and honored citizens. The chisel echoes like soft thunder. You wonder if your name could ever end up there. Probably not. But maybe that's not the point. Historians still argue whether the Olympics were truly unifying or simply a mask for Greek pride and city-state rivalry. But tonight, with the moon silvering the temple roofs and the smoke rising like prayers, it all feels beautifully irrelevant. At the edge of the grounds, near the sacred olive tree, a priest tends to the flame that was lit days ago. He lets it die, not with sadness, but with ceremony. The ashes will be gathered, the tools cleaned, and next time, 4 years from now, it will be lit again, reborn from the same divine sunlight. You look down at your feet, dusty, tired, familiar. You've walked this ground so long, you'll probably dream about it. You don't mind. As the final songs fade, and the last conversations turn to whispers, you take one last walk through the stadium. Empty now, just wind and footprints. You reach the finish line and touch the stone. Cold, worn, eternal, and somehow it feels like you've finished something too. Morning arrives not with trumpets or chants, but with the slow creak of wheels, the shuffle of sandals, and the low groans of people packing up their lives. Olympia, so recently vibrant and booming, now feels like a city waking from a dream. You stand at the edge of the sacred grounds and watch as the great exodus begins. Departure day. Carts rumble down stone paths. Merchants roll up their stalls. Philosophers finish half-formed debates. Athletes, limping, stretching, carrying wreaths and scars, gather with their trainers and prepare for the long journey home. You hear the hiss of coals being doused, the splash of leftover wine poured back into skins, the last calls of goodbye between strangers who became family for a few days. And yet, in all of it, there's a kind of gentleness. No one rushes, no one shouts. Even Sparta's famously abrupt delegation takes their time tying down their crates. Everyone seems to know that leaving Olympia isn't like leaving a market or a battlefield. It's leaving a sanctuary. You walk slowly, tracing your steps backward, past the stadium, past the temples, past the training fields and groves and shrines. Everything looks smaller now, less crowded, more still. The echoes have softened. The gods have said their piece. At the temple of Hera, the priestesses tend to the sacred fire. It's not blazing anymore, just soft embers, carefully banked. You're told the last spark will be carried by torch to nearby cities, passed on to spread the memory of the games. A ritual of light, a promise that this week will echo forward through time. Nearby, two boys, barely teenagers, are practicing a foot race down a quiet path. One stumbles, the other waits, holds out his hand, and pulls him up. Neither speaks. They just run again. You pass by the Zanes, the bronze shame statues of past cheaters. They look sterner now, more patient. You wonder how many athletes walked past them and quietly changed their minds. Then, near the entrance gate, you spot the poet from Thebes again. He's scribbling a final line into his notebook, sitting cross-legged with fig juice on his chin. You ask him if he's staying for the cleanup. He laughs. No, I'm going back to forget all this, until I can remember it better. You find your own things, what little you brought, and tie them up. A vendor you never talked to hands you a leftover honey cake. You take it. He nods. No words. No need. And then, just before you leave the altis, the sacred grove, you turn back. You take one final look at Olympia. The whole sanctuary is golden now in the morning light. The columns cast long shadows. The statues glow faintly. The air smells like laurel and dust. You can almost hear the distant thud of a discus landing, the rhythm of hooves, the chorus of a hymn. Or maybe that's just your memory beginning to stitch it all together. You breathe deep, close your eyes, and step through the gate. As you join the road home, people walk beside you from every city-state you've ever heard of, and some you haven't. They carry stories, scars, laurel crowns, dust in their sandals. Silence hangs for a while. Then someone starts to sing. It's not a hymn. It's not a poem. It's a clumsy drinking song. Someone adds a verse. Someone laughs. The group becomes a procession again, not to the gods, but to the real world waiting beyond. You wonder how long the peace will last. Historians still argue whether the Olympic truce actually stopped all wars during the games, or if it was more like a polite pause in between punches. But as you walk, you realize it doesn't matter. For 5 days, people tried. and that trying, that reaching for something higher, even if it was just a crown of olive leaves and the sound of your name echoing through the stadium, that was the real miracle. You chew your honey cake, stale but sweet. Your footsteps fall into rhythm with the others. Dust kicks up, the sun rises higher, and somewhere behind you, beneath those olive trees and stone temples, the gods smile. Or maybe they sleep, or maybe they watch. Who knows? What matters is this: you were there. You saw it all. You remembered. And now, as the echoes of Olympia fade behind you, your body begins to soften. Your breathing slows. The sandals of other travelers become quieter. The roads blur. The olive groves you passed melt into shadows, gently rolling into hills of thought and memory. Let the images drift now, untethered from time. The roar of the stadium, the crack of hooves, the laughter of a child watching his first foot race, the hiss of sacred flames, the weight of wreaths, the shared silence after a match well fought. They can all rest now like you. The gods of Greece do not demand your loyalty tonight, only your stillness, only your surrender to sleep, to softness, to whatever dreams may rise like incense. Let the dust of the games settle on your thoughts like a blanket. Let your limbs relax, your breath deepen, your mind unwind. You don't have to carry the names of the champions. You don't have to remember the rules of wrestling or the lineage of a charioteer's horse. You only need to rest. You were part of it just for a moment. That's enough. That's everything. So close your eyes. Let the stadium grow quiet. Let the olive trees sway with nighttime breezes. Let the gods retreat to their golden thrones in the clouds. Let the last torch flicker out. The games will return. But for now, it's time to sleep.